The gunshot shattered the evening silence, and Natalie Warren's world changed forever as her father crumpled to the dusty floor of their modest homestead, leaving her utterly alone in the lawless expanse of Dakota Territory in the summer of 1876. She stood frozen, her flour-dusted hands trembling as three men pushed through the door, their faces hard and weathered like the landscape surrounding Fargo. The tallest one, a man with a scar running down his cheek, holstered his weapon and surveyed the room with cold calculation. Natalie's heart hammered against her ribs as reality crashed over her. Her father, the only family she had left after her mother's death 3 years prior, lay motionless. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the wooden planks they had laid together just last spring. "Well now," the scarred man drawled, stepping over her father's body without a second glance. "Looks like old Warren here won't be settling his debts after all." Natalie found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "What debts? My father was an honest man." The scarred man laughed, a harsh sound that made her skin crawl. "Honest? Your daddy borrowed $300 from my boss 6 months back, said he needed it for seed and supplies. Now here we are, and he has not got a cent to his name." He gestured around the sparse room with its simple furnishings and bare shelves. "There must be some mistake," Natalie said, her voice growing stronger despite the fear coursing through her veins. She was 20 years old, had helped her father build this homestead from nothing, and she refused to show weakness in front of these men. "My father would not borrow money without telling me. No mistake, girl." The man pulled a crumpled paper from his vest pocket and tossed it onto the table. "Got his mark right here." Natalie's hands shook as she unfolded the paper. There, in her father's distinctive scrawl, was his signature at the bottom of a loan agreement. Her stomach twisted. He had been so proud, so determined to make this land work. He must have kept it secret, hoping to pay it back before she ever knew. "So what happens now?" she asked, lifting her chin even as tears threatened to spill down her cheeks. The scarred man exchanged glances with his companions. "Well, that depends. The debt does not die with him. It passes to you. $300 plus interest. That makes it $400 even. $400. It might as well have been 4,000. They had nothing. The crops had failed last season, and this year's planting was barely sprouting. Their livestock consisted of 2 chickens and an old mare that could barely pull a plow anymore. "I do not have that kind of money," Natalie said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Take whatever you want from here, but you can see there is nothing of value." The scarred man studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with unease. "Maybe we can work something else out. My boss knows people, has connections. Pretty girl like you could be worth something." The implication hung in the air, thick and nauseating. Natalie backed toward the wall, her mind racing through impossible options. Run. Where would she go? The nearest town was Fargo, 3 miles away, and these men had horses. Fight. She had a rifle over the mantel, but she would never reach it in time. "I have another proposition," a voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. A man stood silhouetted in the fading sunlight, tall and broad-shouldered, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. He stepped into the room, and Natalie caught her first clear look at him. He was younger than she expected, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of aged whiskey. Despite the heat, he wore a leather vest over a dark shirt, and a gun belt sat low on his hips with the ease of someone who knew how to use it. "Quinn," the scarred man said, his tone suddenly wary. "This does not concern you." "I am making it my concern, Marlowe." The newcomer, Quinn, moved further into the room with a casual confidence that somehow made him seem more dangerous than Marlowe's obvious threats. The girl's father owed your boss money. I will cover the debt. Marlowe's eyes narrowed. That is $400, Quinn. You got that kind of money. I got it. Quinn pulled a leather pouch from inside his vest and tossed it to Marlowe. The clink of coins was unmistakable. Marlowe caught it, tested its weight, then loosened the drawstring to peer inside. His expression shifted from suspicion to grudging acceptance. This settles Warren's debt, every cent plus interest. And what do you want in return? Marlowe's gaze flickered between Quinn and Natalie, understanding dawning. Oh, I see. You are buying the girl. I am settling a debt, Quinn corrected, his voice hard as iron. What happens after that is between me and Miss Warren. Natalie's breath caught. She was being traded like property, passed from one man to another to settle her father's mistakes. Anger flared hot in her chest, burning away some of the fear. I am standing right here, she said sharply. I can speak for myself. Quinn's gaze found hers, and something flickered in those amber eyes. Respect, maybe, or surprise. Yes, madam, you can. But right now these men need to leave. Then we can talk. Marlowe tucked the pouch into his coat and gestured to his companions. Fair enough, the debt is settled. What you do with her is your business, Quinn. He paused at the door, looking back at Natalie with something that might have been pity. Your daddy made bad choices, girl. Try not to follow in his footsteps. Then they were gone, their horses' hoofbeats fading into the distance. The silence they left behind felt oppressive, broken only by the sound of Natalie's ragged breathing and the distant call of a meadowlark. She looked down at her father's body, at the blood that had already started to dry in the summer heat. Grief threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed it down. There would be time for mourning later. Right now, she needed to understand what had just happened. Why? She asked, turning to face Quinn. Why would you pay my father's debt? Quinn removed his hat, revealing more of his face. He was handsome in a rough, unpolished way, with a strong jaw and a small scar above his left eyebrow. Because Marlowe works for Cyrus Bell, and I know what Bell does to people who cannot pay their debts. I could not stand by and let that happen. You do not even know me. No, madam, I do not. He met her eyes directly, and she saw honesty there, along with something deeper she could not quite name. But I knew your father, at least a little. He helped me once, about a year back, when my horse went lame on the road to Fargo. He let me stay the night, shared his food, would not take payment. Said neighbors help neighbors in this territory. Natalie remembered that night vaguely. A stranger at their door, leading a limping horse. Her father had insisted on helping, had even given the man some of their precious grain for his horse. She had protested the waste, but her father had been adamant. Kindness always comes back around, he had told her. So this is you repaying that kindness? She asked, her voice thick with emotion she struggled to contain. In part. Quinn turned his hat in his hands, a gesture that seemed almost nervous. But I will be honest with you, Miss Warren. I did not pay your father's debt out of pure charity. I need something too. What? Natalie braced herself, expecting the worst. I need a wife. The words hung in the air between them. Natalie stared at him, certain she had misheard. Excuse me. I have a ranch about 10 miles north of here, near the Red River, Quinn explained, his voice steady and matter-of-fact. It is good land, but working it alone is near impossible. I need help. A partner, someone who understands this territory and is not afraid of hard work. So you bought yourself a wife, Natalie said bitterly. How romantic. Quinn's jaw tightened. I saved you from Cyrus Bell, who would have sold you to the highest bidder or worse. I am offering you a home, honest work, and my name for protection. In this territory, in these times, that is not nothing. He was right, and she hated that he was right. Alone, with no money and no family, she had few options. She could try to work in Fargo, but respectable jobs for women were scarce, and the alternative was unthinkable. She could attempt to maintain her father's homestead, but without money for supplies or help working the land, she would fail within months. Or she could accept this stranger's offer and hope he was as honorable as he seemed. "I need to bury my father," she said quietly, looking down at the body on the floor. "I will help you," Quinn said immediately, "and after you can give me your answer." "I will not force you into anything, Miss Warren. If you decide to take your chances on your own, I will respect that." They worked in silence as the sun set, digging a grave on the small hill behind the house where Natalie's mother already rested. Quinn was strong, his movements efficient and practiced, and he handled the gruesome task with a quiet dignity that Natalie appreciated. She read from her mother's Bible, the only valuable thing they had owned, and said words over her father that she would barely remember later through the haze of grief and exhaustion. When it was done and the stars were beginning to appear in the vast Dakota sky, Quinn built a fire in the hearth and made coffee from the supplies in his saddlebags. Natalie sat at the table, numb and hollow, wondering how her world had collapsed so completely in just a few hours. "Tell me about this ranch of yours," she said finally, cradling the tin cup of coffee in her hands. The warmth was comforting, grounding her in the present moment. Quinn settled into the chair across from her, his large frame making the furniture seem small. "It is called the Crossed Rivers Ranch. I have about 300 acres along the Red River, good grazing land, a decent house, barn, and corral. I run cattle, about 100 head right now, and I am building the herd. It is hard work, but the land is good." "How did you come to own it?" "Worked as a ranch hand for years, saved every penny. Bought the land 3 years ago from a man heading back east. Been building it up since then." He paused, studying her over the rim of his cup. "I will be honest with you, it is not easy. The winters are brutal, the summers are hot, and there is always something that needs fixing or tending. But it is mine, ours if you agree to this. And what would you expect from me? As your wife?" She forced herself to ask the question directly, needing to know exactly what he wanted. Quinn's gaze did not waver. "I would expect you to work alongside me to help run the household and the ranch. I would expect honesty and loyalty. As for the other aspects of marriage." He paused, and for the first time, she saw uncertainty cross his features. "I would not force myself on you if that is what you are asking. We are strangers. Trust has to be earned." Natalie felt something loosen in her chest. "And if I decide I cannot do this, if I want to leave, then you leave. I would not keep you against your will." He set down his cup and leaned forward, his expression serious. "I am not a perfect man, Miss Warren. I have a temper, though I keep it in check. I work too hard and do not always remember to eat regular meals. But I have never raised a hand to a woman, and I never will. You would be safe with me." She wanted to believe him. More than that, she needed to believe him, because the alternative was stepping into an uncertain future alone. She thought of her father, of his dreams for this homestead that had died with him. She thought of her mother, who had followed her father west and had worked herself to exhaustion trying to make a life in this unforgiving land. "I want my mother's Bible," she said, "and I want to be able to visit these graves." "Of course." "And I want your word that if this does not work, if I want to leave, you will let me go with enough money to start somewhere else." Quinn extended his hand across the table. "You have my word, Natalie Warren, on my honor." She looked at his hand, rough and calloused from years of hard work, and then at his face. In his eyes she saw sincerity and perhaps a loneliness that matched her own. She reached out and shook his hand, his grip warm and firm. "Then I suppose we have an agreement, Samuel Quinn." They left at first light the next morning. Quinn helped her gather what few possessions she wanted to keep, loaded them onto a pack horse he had brought along, and then they rode north toward the Red River. Natalie had never been more than a few miles from her father's homestead, and as the landscape rolled past, she felt both terrified and strangely exhilarated. The land was beautiful in its vastness, rolling prairie dotted with wildflowers and stands of cottonwood along the creeks. Quinn pointed out landmarks, explaining the territory with the knowledge of someone who had made it his business to know every inch of his land. He spoke about his plans for the ranch, his hopes for the future, and gradually, Natalie felt some of her fear ease. He was not what she had expected. There was a gentleness to him beneath the rough exterior, a thoughtfulness in the way he helped her dismount when they stopped to water the horses, in the way he asked if she needed to rest without making her feel weak for it. "How old are you?" she asked as they rode, suddenly curious about this man who had so dramatically changed her life. 26, he answered. I will be 27 come September. You? 20. I turned 20 last month. You handle yourself well for 20. A lot of women would have fallen apart after what happened yesterday. Natalie lifted her chin. My mother did not raise a woman who falls apart. She taught me to be strong, to adapt. Her voice caught slightly. Though I admit, this is more adapting than I ever expected to do. It takes courage to accept help, Quinn said, glancing over at her. Some people would rather die than admit they cannot do it alone. That is stubbornness, not strength. They reached the Crossed Rivers Ranch just before noon. The house was larger than her father's homestead, a solid structure with real glass windows and a covered porch that ran along the front. The barn was well maintained, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance, dark shapes against the golden grass. It is beautiful, she said, meaning it. Quinn dismounted and helped her down, his hands steady at her waist. Welcome home, Natalie. The word home echoed in her mind as she looked around. Could this place become home? Could this stranger become something more than the man who had bought her freedom with $400? We should go into Fargo tomorrow, Quinn said as he began unloading the pack horse. Get married proper at the church. Reverend Matthews will do it. The reality of it hit her again. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Samuel Quinn, bound by law and God to a man she had known for less than a day. It should have felt wrong, rushed, terrifying. Instead, it just felt necessary, like all the other hard choices she had made to survive in this unforgiving land. All right, she agreed. Tomorrow, then. That afternoon, Quinn showed her around the ranch. The house was simple but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms, a main living area, and a kitchen that actually had a real iron stove. It was more than she had ever had at her father's homestead. You take the bedroom on the right, Quinn said. I will take the other one. For now. She appreciated that he did not assume, did not push. That night, she lay in an unfamiliar bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, and wondered what her life would become. She thought of her father, of his last moments, and grief washed over her in waves. But beneath the grief was something else, something that might have been hope. Samuel Quinn had saved her. Now she needed to figure out if she could build a life with him. The wedding took place in a small wooden church in Fargo the next morning. Reverend Matthews was a kind-faced man in his 50s who asked no questions about their sudden decision to marry, perhaps accustomed to the practicalities of frontier life. Natalie wore her mother's dress, altered to fit, and Quinn wore a clean shirt and vest, his hair neatly combed back. There were no guests, no celebration. Just the 2 of them standing before God and the Reverend, speaking vows that felt both momentous and surreal. When Quinn slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, Natalie felt the weight of it like a brand, marking her as his. You may kiss your bride, Reverend Matthews said with a gentle smile. Quinn looked at her, a question in his eyes. Natalie nodded slightly, and he leaned down, pressing his lips to hers in a brief, chaste kiss that somehow still made her heart race. When he pulled back, his cheeks were slightly flushed, and she realized he was as nervous about all this as she was. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Quinn," the Reverend said, shaking their hands. "May God bless your union." They signed the marriage register, making it official, and then walked out into the bright sunlight as husband and wife. Quinn helped her into the wagon he had brought for the occasion, and they rode back to the ranch in comfortable silence. It was strange, Natalie thought, how quickly life could change. 2 days ago she had been Natalie Warren, daughter of a failed homesteader, living a quiet, struggling existence. Now she was Natalie Quinn, wife of a rancher, heading toward a future she could not quite imagine. "Are you hungry?" Quinn asked as they approached the ranch. "I am not much of a cook, but I can manage a decent stew." "I can cook," Natalie offered. "Let me take care of dinner. It will give me something to do." She spent the afternoon familiarizing herself with the kitchen, taking inventory of supplies, and preparing a meal with the vegetables from Quinn's small garden and some salted beef from the cellar. It felt good to have a task, something concrete to focus on rather than dwelling on the strangeness of her new situation. Quinn came in as the sun was setting, dusty from working with the cattle, and stopped short when he saw the table set and food ready. "This looks wonderful," he said, genuine appreciation in his voice. They ate together, the silence broken by occasional comments about the food or the ranch. It was not quite comfortable yet, but it was not entirely awkward either. They were two strangers learning to exist in the same space, and Natalie found that Quinn was doing his best to make it easier for her. "Tell me about yourself," Quinn said as they cleaned up after dinner. "I know you were helping your father with his homestead, but what did you do before that?" "Where did you come from originally?" "Pennsylvania," Natalie said, washing the tin plates in a basin of warm water. "Near Philadelphia. My father was a clerk, but after my mother's sister came west and wrote about all the opportunities, he got it in his head that we should go too. My mother was against it at first, but eventually he wore her down." She paused, remembering. "We came out in '73, right before I turned 17. It was harder than any of us expected." "This land has a way of being harder than expected," Quinn agreed, drying the plates with a cloth. "I came from Ohio myself about 8 years back. My father was a farmer, but the land was all played out and there were too many sons for it to support. I was the youngest, so I headed west to make my own way. You miss your family, sometimes." He set down the dried plate and leaned against the counter. "But I chose this life, chose this land. It is mine in a way nothing back in Ohio ever could have been." Natalie understood that. There was something about this wild, untamed territory that called to certain people, that promised freedom and possibility even as it demanded everything you had to give. That night, as she lay in her bed and listened to Quinn moving around in the other room, Natalie thought about the strange twist her life had taken. She was married to a man she barely knew, living on a ranch in the middle of the Dakota Territory, and yet somehow it felt less frightening than it should have. Maybe, she thought as sleep finally claimed her, this could actually work. The days fell into a pattern. Quinn rose before dawn to tend the cattle and handle the never-ending work of maintaining the ranch. Natalie took over the household tasks, cooking, cleaning, and managing the vegetable garden, which she immediately began expanding. She had always been good with growing things, had helped her mother coax vegetables from the stubborn Dakota soil, and she found satisfaction in seeing things flourish under her care. They worked in parallel, their lives intersecting at meals and in the evenings when they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the prairie. Slowly, cautiously, they began to learn each other. Natalie discovered that Quinn had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh despite herself. He was patient and deliberate in everything he did, thinking through problems before acting. He rose early and worked hard, but he also knew when to rest, when to sit back and appreciate what he had built. Quinn, in turn, learned that Natalie was stronger than she looked, stubborn in her determination to pull her own weight. She had a sharp mind and was not afraid to speak it, offering suggestions about the ranch that he found himself seriously considering. She sang while she worked, old songs her mother had taught her, and the sound made the house feel more like a home than it ever had before. 2 weeks after their wedding, Quinn came in from morning chores to find Natalie kneading bread dough with fierce concentration, her sleeves rolled up and flour dusting her arms. The sight of her there, in his kitchen, in his home, made something tighten in his chest. "Natalie," he said, and she looked up, pushing a strand of dark hair from her face with the back of her hand. "I need to go to Moorhead tomorrow, pick up some supplies and check on some business. I thought you might want to come along, see more of the territory." Her face brightened. "I would like that." They set out early the next morning, taking the wagon south toward Moorhead, Minnesota, a larger town across the Red River from Fargo. It was a beautiful day, the sky vast and blue above them, and Natalie found herself relaxing as they traveled. "Tell me about the favor," she said suddenly. Quinn glanced at her. "What? You said you paid my father's debt in part because he helped you once. But $400 is a lot more than payment for a night's shelter and some grain for your horse. Why did you really do it?" Quinn was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the creak of the wagon wheels and the clip of the horse's hooves. Finally, he spoke. "Because I know what it is like to be desperate and alone. When I first came west, I had nothing, just a horse and whatever I could carry in my saddlebags. I worked every job I could find, saved every penny, and watched as other people had families and homes while I had nothing but dreams." He paused, his hands tightening on the reins. "When I finally got the money to buy the ranch, I swore I would never forget what it felt like to be that desperate. So when I saw Marlowe and his men at your father's place, when I realized what they were planning to do, I could not walk away. And when I paid that debt, I saw an opportunity. I needed a partner, someone to help build this ranch into something real. I needed a wife." It was practical, maybe even selfish, but it was honest. "You could have just hired help," Natalie pointed out. "I could have," Quinn agreed. "But I wanted more than hired help. I wanted someone who had a stake in the ranch's success, someone who would fight for it the way I do. And I wanted a family someday, if that is possible." Natalie's heart beat faster at his words. "Children, eventually, if you are willing." He looked at her directly, and she saw vulnerability in his eyes. "I know we are still strangers in many ways. I know you did not choose this freely. But I hope that someday we can be more than two people sharing a house. I hope we can be partners, maybe even friends." "I hope so too," Natalie said quietly, and she meant it. Moorhead was bustling with activity when they arrived. Quinn handled his business at the bank and the feed store while Natalie explored the general store, marveling at the selection of goods. She was examining a bolt of fabric when a woman approached her. "You are new in town," the woman said with a friendly smile. She was in her 30s with kind eyes and a baby on her hip. "I am Margaret Foster. My husband runs the livery." "Natalie Quinn," Natalie said, still getting used to the name. "My husband has a ranch near the Red River." "Quinn, Samuel Quinn." Margaret's smile widened. "He is a good man. Honest and hardworking. You are lucky to have him. You know him." "My husband does business with him regularly. He always pays on time and treats his animals well, which tells you a lot about a person." Margaret shifted the baby to her other hip. If you ever need anything or just want to talk, we live above the livery. It can be lonely out on the ranches. It is good to have friends." Natalie felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. I would like that." When Quinn found her later, she was smiling, a lightness in her step that had not been there before. "You look happy," he observed, loading supplies into the wagon. "I met someone, Margaret Foster. She was kind." Natalie climbed up into the wagon seat. It felt good to talk to another woman. "Margaret is good people," Quinn agreed. "Her husband Jack is a straight shooter. We can visit them more often if you like. I do not want you to feel isolated out at the ranch." The consideration in his words touched her. He was trying so hard to make this work, to give her reasons to stay, to build something real between them. It made her want to try harder too. The ride back to the ranch was pleasant, filled with easier conversation than they had managed before. Natalie found herself watching Quinn as he drove, noting the capable way he handled the horses, the strength in his shoulders, the way the sunlight caught in his dark hair. He was a handsome man, she realized, when she allowed herself to really look at him. That night after dinner, they sat on the porch as usual. The air was warm, carrying the scent of grass and wildflowers, and the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Samuel," Natalie said, using his first name for the first time since their wedding. "Thank you for today. For taking me along, for understanding that I need more than just the ranch." He turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "I want you to be happy here, Natalie. I want you to feel like this is your home, not just a place you ended up because you had no other choice." "It is starting to feel that way," she admitted. "You have been kind to me, patient. That means more than you know." Quinn reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and took her hand. His palm was rough against hers, but his touch was gentle. "I am glad," he said simply. They sat like that as the stars came out, hands linked, and Natalie felt something shift inside her. This man, this stranger who had become her husband, was becoming something more. She did not know if it was love yet, but it was the beginning of something, and that was enough. Summer deepened into its fullest heat, and life on the Crossed Rivers Ranch continued. Natalie threw herself into her work with increasing confidence, expanding the garden, taking on more of the ranch tasks, learning to ride properly so she could help Quinn move the cattle. He taught her with patience, never mocking her mistakes, always encouraging her progress. "You are a natural," he said one day as she successfully guided a stubborn cow back to the herd. Pride shone in his eyes, and it made her feel 10 feet tall. "I have a good teacher," she replied, and the smile he gave her was worth more than gold. They were becoming a team, Natalie realized. They worked together, ate together, talked together. The awkwardness of those first days was fading, replaced by a comfortable partnership. But there was something else growing too, something that made her aware of him in ways she had not been before. She noticed the way his shirt stretched across his back when he worked, the sound of his voice in the morning, rough with sleep, the way he looked at her sometimes, with an intensity that made her skin warm and her heart race. She caught herself thinking about him when they were apart, wondering what he was doing, if he was thinking about her too. One evening in late July, a storm rolled in fast and fierce. Natalie was bringing in laundry from the line when the first drops fell, and by the time she reached the porch, the sky had opened up. Rain poured down in sheets, and lightning split the sky with brilliant white light. Quinn came running from the barn, soaked through within seconds. He bounded up the porch steps, laughing, and Natalie found herself laughing too at the sheer wildness of the storm. "That came on fast," Quinn said, pushing wet hair back from his face. Water dripped from his clothes, pooling on the porch boards. "You are completely drenched," Natalie said, but she was smiling. Come inside, I will get you a towel. They went into the house, and Natalie fetched a towel from the bedroom. When she returned, Quinn had removed his soaked shirt and was standing by the stove, trying to get warm. She stopped short, the towel in her hands, momentarily stunned by the sight of him. She had seen him without a shirt before, glimpsed from a distance when he was working in the summer heat, but never this close. His body was a testament to years of hard physical work, all lean muscle and bronzed skin. A scar ran along his ribs, white against his tan, and she found herself wondering about its origin. Natalie. Quinn's voice pulled her back to herself, and she realized she had been staring. Sorry, she said, handing him the towel, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. I was just thinking about that scar. Quinn glanced down at it, then began drying himself with the towel. Got that 4 years back. A bull decided it did not like me much and introduced me to the fence. Broke 2 ribs and got a nice scar for my trouble. That must have hurt terribly. It did, but I learned to respect bulls a lot more after that. He finished drying off and looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. Natalie, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happy here? Truly happy, not just making the best of a bad situation? The question caught her off guard. She thought about it carefully, wanting to give him an honest answer. I think I am becoming happy, she said slowly. When I first came here, I felt like I had been traded away, like I had no control over my life. But you have given me choices, respected my boundaries. You have made me feel like I matter, like what I contribute means something. So yes, I think I am becoming happy. Are you? More than I have been in years, Quinn said softly. He took a step closer to her, his eyes searching hers. Natalie, I know we agreed to take things slow to give you time to adjust, but I need you to know that my feelings for you have grown beyond just respect or partnership. I care about you. More than I probably should after just 2 months. Natalie's breath caught in her throat. Samuel, I feel it too, this pull toward you. I am not sure when it started, but it is there. Can I kiss you? He asked, his voice rough. A real kiss, not like at the wedding. Instead of answering with words, Natalie stepped forward and rose on her toes, pressing her lips to his. Quinn made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, one hand tangling in her hair while the other wrapped around her waist. The kiss was nothing like their chaste wedding kiss. It was deep and hungry, filled with weeks of growing tension and unspoken desire. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that for weeks, he admitted. So have I, Natalie confessed. I kept telling myself it was too soon, that I needed to be practical and careful. But I do not want to be careful anymore, Samuel. I want to be your wife in every way. His eyes darkened with desire, but he searched her face carefully. Are you certain? I do not want you to feel pressured or like you owe me anything. I am certain. She took his hand and placed it over her heart, which was racing. Feel that. That is what you do to me. That is what I feel when I look at you. I want this. I want you. Quinn kissed her again, softer this time but no less intense. Then he swept her up into his arms, making her gasp and laugh. Then come with me, Mrs. Quinn. Let me show you how much I favor you. He carried her to his bedroom, the larger of the two, and set her gently on the bed. Outside, the storm raged, but inside they created their own storm, one of passion and tenderness, of 2 people finally giving in to what had been building between them since the day they met. Quinn was careful with her, attentive to her needs, making sure she felt safe and cherished even as desire consumed them both. Natalie had never known this kind of intimacy before, had never understood how powerful the connection between a man and woman could be. When they finally came together, it felt like something clicking into place, 2 pieces of a puzzle finding their perfect fit. Afterward, they lay tangled together, listening to the rain drum on the roof. Quinn traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, and Natalie had never felt so content, so completely at peace. "I think I am falling in love with you," Quinn said quietly into the darkness. "I know it is fast, maybe too fast, but it is true." Natalie turned in his arms so she could see his face. In the dim light from the window, his eyes were serious, vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. "I think I am falling in love with you too," she said. "You saved me, Samuel, but more than that, you gave me a home. You gave me a reason to believe in the future again." "You saved me too," he said, cupping her face in his hands. "I was so lonely before you came. I had the ranch, had success, but I had no one to share it with. No one who mattered. You matter, Natalie, more than anything else in my life." She kissed him again, slow and sweet, and they held each other as the storm gradually passed, leaving behind a clean, rain-washed world and two people who had finally found what they had been searching for. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Natalie's life. She and Quinn were inseparable, working together during the day and falling into each other's arms at night. The distance between them had completely dissolved, replaced by a deep and growing love that colored everything they did. They talked about their dreams, their fears, their hopes for the future. Quinn spoke of expanding the ranch, of building up the herd until the crossed rivers was known throughout the territory. Natalie talked about maybe raising horses as well as cattle, about building a real community in the area, about someday having children to fill the house with laughter. "How many children do you want?" Quinn asked one evening as they sat on the porch, Natalie tucked against his side. "I do not know. 2, maybe 3, enough to make the house feel full. What about you?" "As many as you are willing to give me," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I want sons to help run the ranch and daughters to spoil. I want to build something that lasts, something we can pass down to our children and their children." "That sounds wonderful," Natalie said and meant it. She could picture it now, a future full of possibility and love. In mid-August, they made another trip to Moorhead, and Natalie was delighted to see Margaret Foster again. The two women had coffee while Quinn and Jack talked business, and Margaret shared the latest town gossip. "You look different," Margaret observed with a knowing smile. "Happier." "Marriage clearly agrees with you." Natalie felt her cheeks warm. "It does. Samuel is a good man, better than I ever expected." "I am glad to hear it. Some women are not so lucky with frontier marriages, especially ones that happen quickly. But I could tell when I met you both that there was something real between you, even if you did not see it yet yourselves." "We see it now," Natalie said softly. "I love him, Margaret. I did not expect to, but I do." "That is wonderful," Margaret said, squeezing her hand. "Love is precious, especially out here where life can be so hard. Hold on to it." On the ride back to the ranch, Natalie told Quinn about her conversation with Margaret. "She said she could tell we had something real, even from the beginning." "Smart woman," Quinn said, pulling her closer on the wagon seat. "I think I knew from the moment you stood up to Marlowe and said you could speak for yourself. You had such fire in your eyes, such strength. I was lost right then." "I was terrified," Natalie admitted. "Being terrified and being brave are not mutually exclusive. You were both, and it was beautiful." They fell into comfortable silence, and Natalie marveled at how much had changed in just 3 months. She had gone from being a desperate, grieving girl to a confident, loved woman. The ranch felt like home now, truly home, and Samuel felt like the other half of her soul. As summer gave way to early autumn, life on the ranch took on a new rhythm. The work was constant as they prepared for the coming winter, harvesting the last of the garden, laying in supplies, making sure the barn and house were sound. Quinn worked from dawn to dusk, and Natalie worked alongside him, their partnership now so seamless they barely needed words to communicate. One evening in late September, as they were finishing dinner, Natalie felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She pushed her plate away and took a deep breath, trying to settle her stomach. "Are you all right?" Quinn asked immediately, concern creasing his brow. "I am fine," Natalie said, but then the nausea returned, stronger this time. She rushed outside, barely making it off the porch before she was sick. Quinn was there instantly, holding her hair back, supporting her with a strong arm around her waist. When the worst had passed, he helped her back inside and settled her in a chair with a cup of water. "How long have you been feeling poorly?" he asked, crouching beside her. "Just tonight. I felt a little off yesterday, but nothing like this." Natalie sipped the water carefully, her mind racing. She had felt this way once before, years ago when her mother had been pregnant with the baby they had lost. Recognition dawned slowly, wonderfully. "Samuel, I think I might be with child." Quinn went very still. "Are you certain?" "Not certain, but my monthly courses are late and I have been tired, and now this." She looked at him, trying to read his expression. "How do you feel about that?" A slow smile spread across his face, transforming it with pure joy. "How do I feel? Natalie, I am thrilled. Terrified, but thrilled. We are going to have a baby, I think so. I should see a doctor to be sure, but yes, I think we are going to have a baby." Quinn pulled her into his arms, holding her gently as if she were made of glass. "A baby," he repeated, his voice full of wonder. "Our baby." "Natalie, you have made me the happiest man alive." She laughed, tears streaming down her face. "I hope you still feel that way when I am huge and uncomfortable and complaining all the time." "I will love you no matter what," he promised, kissing her forehead. "You are giving me everything I ever wanted. A home, a family, a future. How could I be anything but grateful?" The next day, they made the trip to Fargo to see Dr. Harrison, an older man who had been practicing in the territory for 15 years. He examined Natalie and confirmed what she already knew in her heart. "Congratulations, Mrs. Quinn. I would estimate you are about 6 weeks along. The baby should arrive sometime in early May." May. By next May, she would be a mother. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. As they left the doctor's office, Quinn kept his arm around her waist, as if afraid she might break. "You do not have to treat me like I am fragile," Natalie said with amusement. "I am pregnant, not dying." "I know, but I cannot help it. You are carrying our child. That is precious beyond measure." "I am still going to work," she warned him. "I am not going to spend the next 7 months sitting in a chair doing nothing." "I would not expect you to," Quinn said, "but you will let me help more, and you will tell me if you are feeling unwell or need to rest. I promise." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through autumn and into winter. Natalie's belly grew steadily, and Quinn was endlessly fascinated by it, constantly wanting to feel the baby move, talking to it when he thought Natalie was asleep. He was going to be a wonderful father, she realized, attentive and loving and completely devoted. Winter in Dakota Territory was as brutal as Quinn had warned, with temperatures plummeting and snow piling high around the ranch. But the house was warm and snug, and they spent long evenings by the fire, Quinn reading aloud from newspapers and books while Natalie knitted tiny clothes for the baby. "What do you want?" she asked one night. "A boy or a girl?" "I honestly do not care," Quinn said, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "As long as the baby is healthy and you come through the birth safely, I will be happy." "I think it is a boy," Natalie said. "He kicks like he is trying to break free already." "A son." Quinn's voice was soft with wonder. "A boy to carry on the Quinn name to help build the ranch. We should think of names." They debated names for weeks, finally settling on Thomas if it was a boy after Quinn's grandfather, and Sarah if it was a girl, after Natalie's mother. Either way, the baby would be loved beyond measure, welcomed into a family built on respect, partnership, and a love that had grown from the most unlikely of beginnings. As winter slowly gave way to spring, Natalie grew increasingly uncomfortable. Her back ached constantly, and she could no longer see her own feet. Quinn waited on her hand and foot, taking over all the heavy chores and insisting she rest as much as possible. "I feel like a beached whale," Natalie complained one afternoon in late April. "You look beautiful," Quinn said loyally, kissing her cheek. "You are biased." "Absolutely I am. You are my wife carrying my child. You are the most beautiful woman in the world to me." Despite her discomfort, Natalie could not help but smile. Even after nearly a year of marriage, Quinn's devotion still made her heart flutter. The baby came on a warm May morning, just as the prairie was bursting into bloom with wildflowers. Natalie's labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Quinn feared he would lose her. He held her hand through every contraction, whispered encouragement in her ear, and prayed harder than he had ever prayed in his life. Finally, as the sun reached its zenith, a baby's cry filled the house. Dr. Harrison, who had stayed at the ranch for the past 3 days waiting for the birth, held up a squirming, red-faced infant. "You have a son, Mr. Quinn. A healthy, strong son." Quinn looked down at Natalie, exhausted and sweaty but smiling, and felt his heart expand to a size he had not thought possible. "A son," he whispered. "We have a son." The doctor cleaned and wrapped the baby, then placed him in Natalie's arms. She looked down at the tiny face, at eyes that were struggling to open, and felt tears stream down her cheeks. "Hello, Thomas," she said softly. "We have been waiting for you." Quinn sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around his wife, staring in awe at his son. Thomas had a shock of dark hair and his mother's delicate features. He was perfect, absolutely perfect. "You did it," Quinn said to Natalie, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You brought our son into the world. You are incredible." "We did it," she corrected. "Together like everything else." Over the next few months, they adjusted to life with a baby. Thomas was a good infant, healthy and growing rapidly, with a pair of lungs that could wake the whole ranch when he decided he was hungry. Quinn was a devoted father, walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, and looking at his son with such love that it made Natalie's heart ache. "I never knew I could love someone so much," Quinn said one night, holding a sleeping Thomas against his chest. "It is overwhelming." "I know exactly what you mean," Natalie said, watching them from the bed. Her 2 boys, the center of her universe. Life settled into a new normal, one that revolved around the needs of a growing baby and the never-ending work of the ranch. But they managed it together, supporting each other, working as the team they had become. The ranch prospered under their joint efforts, the herd growing, their reputation for quality cattle spreading throughout the territory. When Thomas was 6 months old, Natalie discovered she was pregnant again. Quinn was overjoyed, though he worried about her having babies so close together. But Natalie was healthy and strong, and their second child, a daughter they named Sarah, arrived the following spring without complications. Sarah had her father's amber eyes and a quiet, contemplative nature that contrasted sharply with Thomas's energetic personality. Quinn spoiled her shamelessly, calling her his little flower, and Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her. The years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. The ranch grew into one of the most successful in the territory, and the Quinn family became well known and respected. They had 2 more children, another son named James and a daughter named Catherine, and the house that had once seemed so large was now filled with noise and laughter and life. Quinn proved to be everything Natalie could have wanted in a husband and father. He was patient with the children, teaching them to ride and work the ranch, but also making sure they had time for play and learning. He never forgot that Natalie was more than just a wife and mother, encouraging her to pursue her interests and always treating her as an equal partner. And Natalie, for her part, had long since stopped thinking of herself as a woman who had been traded for a favor. She was Samuel Quinn's wife, the mother of his children, his partner in every sense of the word. She favored him above all else in her life, just as he favored her. One evening, when they had been married for nearly 15 years, they sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. The children were asleep inside, the ranch was quiet, and the stars were brilliant in the vast Dakota sky. "You remember the day we met?" Quinn asked, his arm around her shoulders. "How could I forget? You bought me for $400 and asked me to marry you within 24 hours. "Not my smoothest moment," Quinn admitted with a laugh. "But I saw you standing there, so strong and defiant even though your world had just fallen apart, and I knew you were someone special." "I thought you were insane," Natalie said, leaning into him, "but I also thought you might be my only chance at a real life. I never expected to fall in love with you, but you did." "Hopelessly," she agreed. "You favor me, Samuel Quinn, and I favor you above all else." "Above all else," he echoed, kissing her softly. "Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for taking a chance on a stranger, for building this life with me, for giving me a family. You are my greatest blessing." "You are mine," she said. "Everything good in my life started the day you walked through that door and decided to save me. I love you. I love you too. Always." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars and reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From tragedy and desperation had come something beautiful and lasting. From a transaction made out of necessity had come a love that would endure for the rest of their lives. The Crossed Rivers Ranch continued to thrive under their joint management. Thomas grew into a strong young man who shared his father's love of the land and his mother's business sense. He took on more responsibility with each passing year, eventually becoming Quinn's right-hand man in running the ranch. When he turned 22, he married a kind young woman named Elizabeth from Moorhead, and Quinn and Natalie delighted in becoming grandparents when Thomas and Elizabeth welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Natalie after her grandmother. Sarah proved to have a gift with horses, breeding and training them with such skill that people came from across the territory to buy from the Quinn ranch. She was independent and determined, reminding Natalie so much of herself at that age. When Sarah was 20, she married a rancher's son from Montana, and though it hurt to see her daughter move away, Natalie was proud of the woman she had become. James followed in his older brother's footsteps, learning the cattle business and proving himself to be a shrewd negotiator. Catherine, the youngest, surprised everyone by announcing at 18 that she wanted to become a teacher, and she moved to Fargo to attend the new normal school there. Quinn and Natalie supported all their children's dreams, giving them the freedom to choose their own paths while always making sure they knew they had a home to come back to. As Quinn and Natalie moved into their 40s, they watched with satisfaction as their children built lives of their own while still maintaining strong ties to the family ranch. The Crossed Rivers had become something more than just a cattle operation. It was a legacy, a testament to what two people could build when they worked together with love and determination. "We did well, did we not?" Quinn said one evening as they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren were gathered around the table, laughing and talking, filling the house with joy. "We did very well," Natalie agreed, squeezing his hand. When I think about where we started, about that terrified girl and the lonely rancher who saw an opportunity, and then I look at all of this. We built something extraordinary. We built it together, Quinn said. That is what matters. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed or headed back to their own homes, Quinn and Natalie walked out to the spot where they had first kissed during that summer storm so many years ago. The night was clear and warm, filled with the sounds of the prairie at peace. I would do it all again, Quinn said, pulling her into his arms. Every moment, every challenge, every blessing, I would choose you every single time. I would choose you too, Natalie said, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. You saved my life, Samuel, but more than that, you gave me a reason to love it. You showed me what it means to truly partner with someone, to build something together that is greater than the sum of its parts. You were traded for a favor, Quinn said softly, echoing the words that had started their journey, but you became the most favored thing in my life. Above the ranch, above success, above everything. You and our family are what matter most. And you are what matters most to me, Natalie said. This life we have built, these children we have raised, this love we share, it is everything I never knew I needed. They stood there under the stars, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and had built something beautiful and lasting. The wild frontier that had once seemed so unforgiving had become their home, and the stranger who had paid her father's debt had become the love of her life. As the years continued to pass, Quinn and Natalie grew old together, their love only deepening with time. They watched their grandchildren grow, celebrated the arrival of great-grandchildren, and took pride in seeing the Quinn name become synonymous with integrity and hard work throughout Dakota Territory and beyond. When North Dakota achieved statehood in 1889, they were invited to the celebration in Bismarck, honored guests as pioneers who had helped build the territory into something worthy of statehood. Standing there with Quinn beside her, Natalie thought about how far they had come, both as individuals and as partners. They were in their 50s now, their hair streaked with gray, their bodies bearing the marks of decades of hard work. But when Quinn looked at her, she still saw the same devotion in his eyes that had been there on their wedding day. And when she looked at him, she saw the man who had saved her, loved her, and built a life with her that exceeded her wildest dreams. "We made it," she said to him as they stood on the steps of the Capitol building, watching the celebration unfold around them. "We did," he agreed, taking her hand. "And we are not done yet. We have more years ahead of us, more grandchildren to spoil, more dreams to chase." "Always together," Natalie said. "Always together," Quinn confirmed. "You and me facing whatever comes just like we always have." They returned to the Crossed Rivers Ranch, to the home they had built with their own hands and filled with love. They continued to work the ranch, though they left more of the day-to-day operations to Thomas and James. They spent long evenings on the porch, holding hands and watching the sunset, reflecting on the incredible journey they had shared. When Quinn turned 60, he surprised Natalie with a gift. It was a journal, bound in fine leather, with their story written inside. He had spent months working on it, documenting their journey from that first desperate day to the life they had built. "I wanted our great-grandchildren to know our story," he explained as she read through it, tears streaming down her face. "I wanted them to understand that love can come from the most unexpected places, that commitment and partnership can create miracles, and that sometimes the best things in life come from the hardest moments." "This is beautiful," Natalie said, clutching the journal to her chest. "Thank you, Samuel. Thank you for remembering every detail, for valuing our story enough to preserve it." "How could I not? It is the best story I know. It is our story. They spent their golden years in contentment, surrounded by the family they had created and the legacy they had built. The ranch continued to prosper under the next generation's management, and the Quinn family remained central to the community, known for their generosity, integrity, and the enduring love between the patriarch and matriarch. On a warm summer evening in 1898, 22 years after that fateful day when a gunshot had changed everything, Quinn and Natalie sat on their porch as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and orange. They were in their 60s now, their lives full and rich, their love as strong as ever. "Do you have any regrets?" Natalie asked, a question she had never posed before. Quinn thought about it carefully, then shook his head. "Not a single one. Oh, I wish some things had been easier for you, that you had not had to suffer the loss of your father, that your path to me had been gentler. But I cannot regret where we ended up, can you?" "No," Natalie said honestly. "I grieved my father, and I always will. But his death, as terrible as it was, brought me to you. It gave me this life, this family, this love. I cannot regret that. We have been blessed," Quinn said, pulling her close. "So incredibly blessed." "We have been partners," Natalie corrected. "We have worked for every blessing we received. We built this together brick by brick, day by day. That is not luck, that is love." "You are absolutely right," Quinn said, kissing her temple. "That is love. The kind that lasts, the kind that weathers storms and celebrates victories, the kind that only grows stronger with time." They sat together as darkness fell and the stars emerged, one by one, filling the vast Dakota sky. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of family visiting, grandchildren playing, the continuation of the life they had built. Outside, the land stretched in every direction, the ranch they had created through determination and devotion, a testament to what two people could accomplish when they truly partnered together. "I love you, Natalie Quinn," Samuel said, as he had said countless times over the years. "I love you, Samuel Quinn," she replied, as she had replied countless times and would reply countless times more. "You favor me above all else. And you favor me," he said. "Always." They remained there, two souls who had found each other in darkness and had created light, two hearts that beat as one, two lives that had become so intertwined they could no longer imagine existence apart. The cowboy who had paid a debt and gained a wife. The young woman who had been traded for a favor and had found a love that exceeded all understanding. Their story had started with tragedy and transaction, but it had become something far greater. It had become a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of choice, commitment, and the courage to open one's heart to possibility. In the wild expanse of the Dakota Territory, in the harsh and unforgiving landscape of the American frontier, Samuel and Natalie Quinn had built something that would last beyond their own lifetimes, a legacy of love that would inspire generations to come. And as they sat together under the stars, hands clasped, hearts full, they knew that every challenge had been worth it, every struggle had led them to something better, and every moment of their shared life had been exactly what it was supposed to be. They had started as strangers bound by necessity, but they had become partners, lovers, friends, and soulmates. They had created a family, built a ranch, and most importantly, they had found in each other everything they had been searching for without even knowing they were searching. The wind whispered across the prairie, carrying with it the scent of grass and wildflowers and the promise of tomorrow. And Samuel and Natalie Quinn, sitting together as they had done for over 2 decades, knew that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together, as they always had, favoring each other above all else in their lives.